Have you ever noticed something that makes absolutely no sense? Two plants, the same species, the same age, planted only a few feet apart. One looks incredible, strong growth, healthy leaves, constant progress. The other, barely surviving, yellow leaves, slow growth, constant problems. And the strange part is this, they're in the same garden, getting the same rain, the same sunlight, the same care. So why does one thrive while the other struggles? Most people assume it's bad luck, or weak seeds, or some mysterious gardening curse. But the real answer is much more interesting, because gardens are not as uniform as they appear. Even small spaces contain countless invisible differences, and those differences change everything. The first reason plants perform differently is something happening beneath the surface. Roots. Most people focus entirely on what they can see: leaves, flowers, fruit, growth above ground, but roots determine almost everything, and roots rarely experience identical conditions. One plant may find loose soil, the other may hit compacted ground, one may access deeper moisture, the other may struggle for oxygen, and because all of this happens underground, the mixture remains invisible until the results appear above the surface. Another major factor is sunlight, and this surprises many gardeners because they assume sunlight is evenly distributed, but it rarely is. A nearby fence, a tree branch, a neighboring plant, even a building several yards away, can create subtle changes throughout the day. One plant may receive 6 hours of direct sunlight, another receives 4. That difference might seem small, but over an entire season, it becomes enormous. More energy, more growth, more resilience, all from a difference that most people never notice. Then there's water. Not how much water you provide, but where that water actually ends up, because water never distributes perfectly. Some areas drain quickly, others retain moisture, some locations stay cool, others dry out rapidly, so even when watering is consistent, plant conditions are not. One plant develops steady moisture, the other experiences constant stress, and stressed plants always struggle more. Now here's something many people overlook completely: competition. Plants don't simply grow beside each other, they compete for nutrients, for water, for sunlight, for root space, and sometimes one plant wins that competition without anyone realizing it's happening. This is especially common in crowded beds. Everything looks healthy at first, then gradually, certain plants begin dominating, and weaker plants fall behind, not because they're unhealthy, but because they're being outcompeted. Another hidden factor is soil biology. This is where gardening becomes fascinating, because every handful of soil contains an entire ecosystem, millions of microorganisms, beneficial fungi, bacteria, tiny organisms constantly interacting with roots, and those populations are not identical everywhere, even within the same bed. One plant may develop strong relationships with beneficial microbes. Another may not. One may access nutrients efficiently. The other may struggle. And once again, the difference appears above ground, while the cause remains hidden below. Temperature also plays a larger role than most people realize. A few degrees can matter. Dark surfaces absorb heat differently, raised beds warm faster, protected corners retain warmth longer. Small variations create different growing conditions, and some plants respond dramatically. One thrives, one slows down, all because of tiny environmental differences. Now let's talk about stress, because plants experience stress constantly: heat stress, water stress, root stress, transplant stress, wind stress, and here's the important part: stress compounds. One small challenge rarely causes major problems, but several small challenges together can dramatically reduce growth. This is why struggling plants often seem confusing. There isn't one obvious cause, there are several small pressures working together, each one weakening the plant slightly, until the difference becomes visible. Another reason some plants thrive is timing, not planting date. Growth timing. Plants develop at different rates, even within the same variety. One establishes roots quickly, another takes longer. The faster plant gains an early advantage, then captures more sunlight, develops stronger roots, accesses more resources, and continues pulling ahead. A small early difference becomes a major gap later. Nature works like that constantly. Small advantages become large outcomes. Now here's something experienced gardeners understand. Location matters more than people think. Not garden location, micro-location. The exact spot where the plant grows. A difference of 2 feet can completely change conditions. More wind, less moisture, different shade, different soil structure, different competition, and because gardens appear uniform, most people never suspect these differences exist. But plants notice every single day. Another hidden reason is recovery. Healthy plants recover quickly from stress. Weak plants don't. Imagine 2 plants facing the same hot afternoon. One recovers overnight. The other takes days. After weeks of repeated stress, the gap becomes obvious. This is why resilience matters so much. Not avoiding stress completely, but recovering efficiently. The strongest gardens are not stress-free, they're resilient. Now let's talk about nutrients, because people often misunderstand this completely. More nutrients do not automatically create better growth. Balance matters more. Too much nitrogen, too little potassium, poor nutrient availability, weak soil biology, all affect plant performance differently, and because nutrient issues rarely appear immediately, they often go unnoticed until growth slows significantly. Another major factor is airflow. Healthy airflow reduces disease pressure, improves drying after rain, strengthens stems, creates better growing conditions overall, but airflow varies across every garden. One area stays open and fresh, another remains trapped and humid. One plant benefits, another struggles. The difference may seem minor, but plants experience those conditions every hour of every day, over months. The results become dramatic. Here's where things get really interesting. Sometimes thriving plants are simply better matched to their environment, not because they're superior, because they're suited. A plant that loves heat will outperform one that prefers cooler conditions. A drought-tolerant plant will outperform one needing constant moisture. The environment determines success more than effort, and many gardeners spend years fighting conditions instead of working with them. Now here's the biggest lesson of all. Healthy gardens are not built through perfect control. They're built through observation. The best gardeners don't constantly force outcomes. They study patterns. Which plants succeed, which plants struggle, where moisture collects, how sunlight moves, where growth is strongest. Because every thriving plant contains information. Every struggling plant does too. The garden is constantly communicating. Most people simply don't notice. Once you start observing these patterns, everything changes. You stop guessing, you stop reacting randomly, you start understanding causes, and understanding causes creates better decisions. Over time, plant placement improves, soil improves, conditions improve, and the entire garden becomes stronger. That's why some plants thrive while others struggle in the same garden. Not luck, not magic, not secret techniques. Small, invisible differences, working quietly every day. Until eventually, those differences become impossible to ignore. The good news is this: once you learn to see them, you can work with them. And when you do, the entire garden starts making much more sense.